So tonight we're going to be looking at the book of Ecclesiastes once again. So if you want to be turning your Bibles to chapter 2 with me, Ecclesiastes chapter 2. And we've been examining this great book. I think it's a wonderful book to study. It helps you to really ponder things. And when we think about the traditional author, which I believe to be Solomon, he is definitely... This is the most philosophical book there is. I mean, it really does talk about the meaning of life to us. And last time we talked about this book, we saw, hey, there's failure in the physical world. That's not going to help you. There's failure in the philosophical world. Philosophy is not going to save you. It doesn't have the true meaning that it does. And so when I think about Solomon and what he is really trying to engage us to think about, to pause, ponder, and profit, that there is nothing in this world that can really, that can really fill the soul except Jesus Christ. And of course, I know at this time, Jesus hadn't come, but Jesus would come. And Jesus is the one that will bring forth that which we all need, which is redemption. And so we all have something missing in our lives, but Jesus came to bring it. And then we talked about one of the key terms of Ecclesiastes is he talks about the word vanity. A better translation that some have suggested is the word vapor. Because life is like a vapor. It, as James says, it appears for a little time and then vanishes away, right? And so you can see that is the case. Then we think about this life. It's so transient. It lasts just for a little while, and then poof, it's gone. And so we think about how this same word is used of Abel. Think about his life. His life was so righteous, and yet it lasted for a short time, and then it vanished away. His brother Cain killed him. And so when we think about the questions that we all have questions about the Bible. But the Bible has questions for us. And the Bible wants us to really think about the questions it asks us. What does man ultimately gain under the sun? And of course, the answer is it's nothing. All we experience is the toil, which has been unfortunately the curse from Genesis chapter 3. And we have to see this from a different perspective. Now, Solomon also wants us to think about our worldview, and he's going to want us to adjust it. He wants us to change it to be what it needs to be. He wants us to be realistic. And if we really are honest with this book, then we will adopt Solomon's perspective. We will see, all right, I understand that there's nothing of ultimate gain under the sun, that it is actually all about God himself, that I am to fear him and keep his commandments. That is man's all. That's what brings meaning to true life. And so that's what we need to really think about. Because as we've seen, think about the world that we live in. It's so full of problems, but Christ Jesus came to redeem the world. Romans 18 through 25 point that out to us. And we can also see that in this world, we unfortunately, those of us who are made in the image of God, we've actually sadly looked at what God has given to us in his creation, and we've made it into idols. And we see that. We see this definitely in Romans chapter 1. And so what I want us to do in chapter 2, we're not going to look at all the verses, but we're going to see that Solomon starts to go on this search. He goes on and investigates. And what he's going to do is he's going to talk about pleasure first. So he's going to tell us his plan, and then he's going to tell us the different types of pleasures there are. And he wants those which test the heart. And then he wants us to ponder about the test. Did they really fulfill us? Does pleasure really fulfill us? Does riches really satisfy the soul? Well, we'll see how he answers that question. So he begins by saying, I said to myself, go ahead, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy what is good. But it turned out to be futile. And so his first test, all right, I'm planning on talking about pleasure. And I think that's what would probably make at our top of our list, probably mostly. Some of us might go for, education or money or something of that nature, or riches. But some people are going to say, hey, you know what? I want to test pleasure. Will that satisfy? Will that fulfill my expectations? And then I think Solomon, he goes ahead and tells us, after I did my investigation, I found it to be futile. I found it to be vaporous. It doesn't fulfill yourself, to fulfill your life. And I think what's interesting is he also talks about how not every pleasure that Solomon talks about is morally wrong. We'll point out which ones are and which ones aren't. But we should remember that pleasure is something that God gave to man in different ways. For example, James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. And definitely in Genesis 2, you see God's grace abounds. He gives all these gifts to Adam and Eve to enjoy. So pleasure is from God. But it's how people have abused it, how people have perverted it in such a wicked way, such as 1 Corinthians 6:9-11 talks about. Let me give an example of this, if I may. So in Ephesians chapter 5, the famous text about marriage, and you can read that for yourself, verses 22-33, talking about the duties of the husband and the duties of the wife toward the husband. I like how you read all through that text, and the main point that Paul wants to get to us is found in actually verse 32. He says, "This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church." I mean, all along we thought, oh, he's talking about husbands and wives, and which, yes, that's true, but you got to look at the overview. You got to look at, from Genesis 2, there was actually a type there of Adam and Eve. There was something greater than Adam and Eve, and that is the church and Jesus Christ. Them becoming one. That's what Paul is alluding to. And so when we think about the mystery of marriage, it's something that's so beautiful and something that is a gift from God and something that we should enjoy, but it takes a lot of hard work to make. But I want you to think about, why is it that there are some sexual sins? Why are they against the sacred institute of marriage? So, and I got this from a really interesting book, and I thought the guy had a good point with regards to this. So think about the perverted ways there are about sex, about God's gift. And there's sadly bestiality, adultery, homosexuality, fornication, pornography. And I want you to think about how each of these things in some ways distorts the beautiful picture of marriage. So, for example, fornication before marriage, that's wrong because it messes with God's mystery of marriage. It messes with it. It entangles it in something that God never meant for it to become. Adultery is wrong because it violates God's divine mystery of marriage. And then homosexuality is wrong because it perverts the divine mystery of marriage. And so you can think about why God said these things were wrong. It has a bigger theological reason behind it. And so we need to think about the pleasure that God grants unto us. Now, and use it in such a godly manner. So anyways, he says, Solomon says, I said about laughter. So he's going to kind of say, all right, here's my main point, pleasure. Now let's talk about subset of pleasure, laughter. Let's talk about that. It is madness. What does this accomplish? I think it's interesting that he talks about laughter. Now, when I think about laughter, I don't know anyone who hates to laugh. I mean, think about that for a moment. Who hates to laugh? I don't think anybody in here would want to stop laughing. Well, maybe sometimes, not all the time. But we all like to laugh. And when you think about it, there are some good reasons for laughter. Number one, it is a good medicine. Proverbs 17:22. A merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. I remember one time, and I decided to look this up, and I actually found the article that I was looking for. And the title of the article was, Saving Your Life May Be a Laughing Matter. You know, we've all heard the other way around. It's not a laughing matter, right? When your life is in danger. Well, this was 1 year after I was born. This guy wrote this article about this man who had this dreadful disease. And to help him heal of his disease, he actually watched the Marx Brothers. Now, some of us don't know the Marx Brothers, but they were funny comedians. I mean, they make you laugh. One of the comedians that makes me laugh from the old days is, of course, the Three Stooges. I don't know if y'all like the Three Stooges. Maybe it's Andy Griffith. Maybe it's you name it. But these guys love to make you laugh, and they can really do so. And yet they're good medicine. And so I think that's really interesting that's what takes place. In fact, this is what he says in his article at the very end. He says, "It's astounding to see what happens when you get people really laughing," Stalin said. "If you see these people, and if I would tell you the medical status of some of these people, you just wouldn't believe it. Whether laughing makes the dying healthier, makes them feel that way, or look, it is the subject of some debate. Nevertheless, the point is that there seems to be improvement, period." And so you can see how laughter is a good thing in our world. Even, I think Jesus, of course, he used laughter in the Scriptures. There's a famous book. Well, I don't know if it's famous anymore, but I read it in college, and it was such a short book full of meaning by Elton Trueblood, called The Humor of Christ. And you can actually read the Gospels, and you will see that Jesus does have a sense of humor. I think Jesus had a sense of humor in Matthew 7, 1 through 5. I mean, think about it. "Judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Hey, let me remove the speck from your eye,' and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and that you will see clearly remove the speck from your brother's eye." I think Jesus got some in his audience to snicker. Because think about the illustration, and I got this from you got the speck in your eye? Oh, you got that plank in your eye. You need to remove that. I mean, it's just funny. I mean, I really think it was funny that he said that. Well, what else about laughter? Well, it not only is good medicine, but two, it really brings about, you get to escape from the world that we live in. And we need that sometimes. We think about how life is very serious, and sometimes, man, you just need to stop, and you need to smell the roses, and you need to think about, man, I want life to be a little bit better than it now is. And so laughter can help you with that. One of the things I like to do, Emily and I like to watch Studio C. If you ever go to YouTube, you can watch these guys, and they're really funny. They live in Utah, and they produce clean comedy that's just funny, and it's good to help make life more bearable. But is laughter, does it really contain the solution? Does it contain the medicine that will ultimately fulfill your life? And unfortunately, it doesn't. I mean, when you think about it, cannot deal with the wrongs of this world that we live in. I like how someone said, I was listening to a sermon, and he said about this, he said, you can go to a funeral home. And of course, people can laugh there if they want, but that would be really weird to do so because we're at a funeral, right? And yet that laughter is not going to produce that dead body from raising back from the dead. That's just not going to happen. In fact, if you look at Ecclesiastes 3 verse 4, a time to weep, time to laugh. So you don't laugh all the time. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 2, I think it's really interesting what Solomon will say later on. Better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. We were talking about in our Bible class about why we have to suffer as God's children. And you think about it, which more do we learn from? Do we learn more from pain or pleasure? Well, of course, I think everybody would say, I learned more from pain. Pain taught me much more. It helped shape me into what I needed to be. And so we learn more about death. We learn more of what it sobers us to think about how short this life really is. So he goes on to say, so you realize laughter doesn't work. I explore with my mind the pool of wine on my body. My mind still guided me with wisdom and how to grasp folly until I could see what is good for people to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. Now here, when he talks about wine, you have to recognize that in the context of the Bible, you have to figure out, okay, is he talking about non-alcoholic wine? Because when we think about wine in our culture today, we automatically think, oh, he's alcoholic. But in the Bible, you just have to realize, okay, depending on the context, either it's non-alcoholic or alcoholic. Let me give you an example. So this is an example of non-alcoholic. Isaiah 16:9-10. Therefore I will bewail the vine of Sibmah with the weeping of Jazer. I will drench you with my tears, O Heshbon and Eliah. For battle cries have fallen over your summer fruits and your harvest. Gladness is taken away and joy from the plentiful field. In the vineyards there will be no singing, nor will there be shouting. No treaders will tread out wine in the presses. I have made their shouting cease. So notice the word wine there. What is he talking about? Well, if you go to ancient Israel, how they would actually press wine in those days. Remember, they would actually put the grapes, all these grapes, and they would stomp on them and step on them so that the juice would come out and they would flow down into this vat, as you can see here. So that was definitely non-alcoholic. But there's also, in the context, we recognize there is alcoholic wine. So Proverbs 20 verse 1, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whosoever is led astray by it is not wise. Proverbs 23, 29-35, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last it bites like a serpent, stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. Yes, you will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or like one who lies at the top of the mast, saying, they have struck me, but I was not hurt. They have beaten me, but I did not feel it. When shall I awake, that I may seek another drink? So, as you can see, is the wine here in Ecclesiastes 2, is it alcoholic or non-alcoholic? Okay, let's just say, for the perspective, what if it was now alcoholic he's talking about? Well, then grape juice never satisfies. And I think we've all drank grape juice and we realize, you know what, that doesn't really satisfy the soul, right? So, but if he's talking about alcoholic wine, then of course we know that people, why do they take alcohol? Why is it that people drink alcohol? Well, for many reasons, but some people drink alcohol for its pleasure, which is what we're talking about. But they also take it because they think they can drink away their problems, right? They think, hey, I drink a bottle and my problems will be solved. When actually, unfortunately, you get a hangover and you still have those problems in the morning, right? Even you have more problems than you started out with, unfortunately. And unfortunately, at KCU, for example, we run into students all the time. They ask us, do you drink? We'll say, no, we don't drink. And you know what they'll ask us next? Well, what do you do for fun? Do for fun? There's a lot of things to do for fun that's not simple. I don't see how people think that, alcohol, it's the most fun thing to do. When, in fact, what does a Christian ought to be? A Christian ought to be sober-minded. Be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. I think one of the greatest things that face us today is we need to think about our influence. Our influence, our example affects other people. So let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Think about, as Jesus said, a tree will be known by its fruits. Every bad tree produces bad fruit. Every good tree produces good fruit. Now, I know he was talking about false prophets in that context, but we can apply this. Look at the fruits of alcohol. What has it really done? Has it really done good for mankind? I mean, think about how it's caused car wrecks, how it's caused spousal abuse, homicides, child abuse, suicide, you name it. I think it's caused so much pain and agony. I think all of us, unfortunately, can name relatives of ours who have gotten into trouble over this matter because of what alcohol has done. And so the bottle is not the answer to true satisfaction. As 1 Peter 4, 1-5 says, therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind. For he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lust of men, but for the will of God. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. In regards to these, the world's going to think it's strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dissipation, speaking evil of you. But they will give an account to him who's ready to judge the living and the dead. Well, here Solomon keeps on going. So he says, I increase my achievements. I build houses. Now what he's going to deal with next is he's going to say, look at all these building constructions. Look at all the riches that I've gathered. And I'm going to tell you that it does not produce true satisfaction. And so he begins with houses first. That's his first riches. And notice it's not house, not singular, but plural. He built houses. Wow. Even some of us would just like to have just one house, right? That'd be satisfying enough. But he had houses that he wanted. And he says, I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself and planted every kind of fruit tree in them. I constructed reservoirs for myself from which to irrigate a grove of flourishing trees. Some of you might remember that in ancient times, Nebuchadnezzar, he was king of Babylon, and for his foreign wife, he wanted to build this hanging gardens, and that was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So during this time, hey, to have vineyards and gardens like this, man, that was you were on top of the world. And, to have all these fruit trees, to pick from all these oranges and apples and you name it, man, to have all those kinds of fruits to eat from, that'd be great. But did that really help? Notice here in this text, think back with me. Look how he says, I made gardens, fruit trees. And if you think about it, what does this remind you of? And I don't know about you, but it reminds me of Eden. Think about the connection between Genesis and Ecclesiastes. When you think about it, there is a parallel between Solomon and Adam. Adam, in a sense, remember God said you will have dominion over the creatures, over everything. So Adam was king. He had it all. But unfortunately, he lost it all. He was kicked out of the garden. And think about us. Think about Solomon. He had it all. He had all the wisdom in the world. He had all the riches in the world. He had everything. But then he lost it all because he turned away from God as well. And so I think you can see here there's some type of desire to recover that which is from Eden. And so I invite you sometime to read Genesis chapter 2 and 3 and also read 1 Kings 3 through 11, and you'll see this. I think J.R.R. Tolkien said it best. He was the author of The Lord of the Rings. He says, we all long for Eden, and we are constantly glimpsing it. Our whole nature at its best and least corrupted, its gentlest and most human, is still soaked with the sense of exile. So we all long to go back to paradise, to that dwelling with God. And yet, we're not going to find it if we try to go to those things that are in this world. Well, Solomon keeps on going. So he says, I acquired male and female servants and had slaves who were born in my house. So, think about it. He had everybody serving him hand and foot. Wow. He had it all, right? It goes on. I also owned livestock, large herds and flocks, more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Now, we don't think of having horses and camels and oxen. And we don't think of that today as being very rich. But during that time, man, you were rich if you had all this different types of livestock. Just think about Abraham for a moment. Think about Job. That's why it mentions the different types of animals that he had. Because to be rich was to have a lot of livestock. And Solomon definitely had that. Well, he goes on to say, I also amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. Silver and gold, still known to us even today as being rich. He had, if you read about in 1 Kings what he had as gold, it really astounds us in over billions and billions of dollars. We know when we think about it, think about how riches do test us. And we were talking about that kind of today. When we think about rich people, we think, oh, who are the rich people? It's people who have more money than we do. But in fact, if you think about it, we are in the top 5% category. We are all very rich. According to if you measured all 7 billion people, we would all be in that 5% category. And so Paul knew Timothy would really struggle with this, and some Christians at Ephesus were struggling with this. But we can struggle with it even today. And we have to be careful that we do not have a love for money. Think about how unbelievers also face this challenge and obstacle. Let me give you an example. Look at Acts 16 through 19 sometime. Why did those guys get mad at Paul for exorcising that demon out of that slave girl? Because when he exorcised that demon out of that girl, well, that went out their profit, right? And if you cut the money, you're going to get some people who are irritated at you. Well, that's what happened to Demetrius. He realized, oh no, I'm not going to be in the idol-making business anymore, because Paul is preaching against Diana, and he's saying that she's a false god, and we got to rise up and fight this. So he had the love of money. He was covetous. And then you got Felix. Felix, he put Paul on trial, and he put him in prison. And then Felix later on, he says, hey, Paul, I'll let you go if you give me a bribe. See, people are faced with the love or desire for money. So it says, now godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing in this world, and it's certain that we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. And then he goes on to say, verse 17, command those who are rich in this present age, not to be haughty, nor to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who gives us richly all things to enjoy. Let them do good, that they may be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share, storing up for themselves a good foundation for the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. I think a good movie I would ask you to watch, if you haven't watched it, is a movie called The Ultimate Gift. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's a movie about this grandfather who had been in the oil business in Texas. And he had over billions of dollars in this trust fund. And he had 3 children. And unfortunately, he allowed the love of money to get him at the first. But he realized how spoiled rotten his children were becoming, because all they would do is ask for money and they wouldn't care how they spend it. And so he had a lot of regrets later in his life. And unfortunately, one of those 3 sons died in a plane wreck. And the grandson of that dead son was still living, and he saw something in that grandson he believed could change. You see, that grandson, he was spoiled rotten just like the rest of them. He just said, oh, my grandfather's dead. Why don't he just give me his inheritance? And so what the grandfather does is he puts him through all these different tests. And I don't want to tell you what happens at the end of the movie, because I don't want to spoil it. But, it's really interesting to see how this person changes. Let me just put it that way. And so we can see that when you look at this movie, you'll see that the sons, they're never satisfied with money. They're just like, hey, where's the money? I want the money. And their character is rotten to the bone. And so we need to think about what money does, the love of money does do to people. It always makes us more miserable. I was just happening to look up an article in February 23rd, 2018. And yet Ecclesiastes already talks about this. I mean, it's as modern as the newspaper is. That's why I love the Bible. It's so relevant even today. And they talked about the dark reasons why rich people are so miserable. And look at this. And we could name them probably. More money, more problems. More money, more wants. More money, more isolation. More money, more work. I mean, isn't that true? That's how money can make people miserable. Well, he goes on to say, I gathered male and female singers for myself. Here's a person who had Adele, right? Here's a person who had Taylor Swift, singers to sing, famous singers. Things like that. I know it's a joke, but, to hear great music. I mean, we all like to hear great music, but that doesn't satisfy the soul. And he says, many concubines, the delights of man. I mean, he's talking about sex here. 700 wives, 300 concubines. And yet, that truly did never satisfy him. I want us to think about something with me, if you don't mind. I was looking at an article about pornography and how there's so many problems that are, that's one of the problems we're facing in the Lord's church today, is this problem because it's this big elephant in the room, but nobody wants to talk about it. It is a silent, deadly spiritual killer. And there's really some strong reasons why we must face this topic. Because pornography does change your mind. It does, unfortunately, it's like a drug. And we need to help people to overcome this problem. And the second reason is it does hinder you from having a real relationship with somebody. And we've seen people who go to counseling and they're facing with this problem, and we need to help them. We need to let the church, unfortunately, people just don't see the church as a hospital where we can come for a cure, where we need to pray for one another, to help one another with these problems. And so I think one of the things that could help us with overcoming this problem is you have to look and treat people to be made in God's image. That's so very important. Because how you treat God is how you treat His creation. Well, so Solomon goes through all these tests, right? And he finds out it's futile. It doesn't satisfy. And so let's look at the ponderings on the test. So he says, I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also remained with me. All that my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not refuse myself any pleasure, for I took pleasure in all my struggles. This was my reward for all my struggles. When I consider all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile and a pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. So you can ask Solomon this question. Was it worth it? Was pleasure worth it? Was riches worth it? You would say no. You put all these fill in the blanks. Did servants fulfill you? Did houses fulfill you? No, nothing did. And he says it was all vaporous. It's all fleeting. It all is transient. And there's no ultimate gain. That's where Jesus comes, and I think he says it best. He says, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? What will a man give in exchange for his soul? There's ponderings that we can think about. Is number one, Solomon is right. He was one of the wisest men ever. And yet we have a greater than Solomon, Jesus Christ. And he's telling us there's nothing as valuable as your soul. Don't give anything in exchange for it. And then also number two, God's not going to deceive you. Trust in God. He knows what's best for you. And yet here we're listening just like happened at the beginning in the Garden of Eden. We're saying, oh, God doesn't really want to do what's best for you. You're missing out on something. And so we need to really don't listen to the voice of the deceiver. Listen to God. He is the source of all truth. And then number three, God wants us to have true satisfaction in Him. I love Isaiah 55. Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. You who have no money, come buy and eat. Yes, come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend money for what's not bread? Your wages for what does not satisfy. Listen carefully to me. Eat what is good. Let your soul delight itself in abundance. Incline your ear and come to me. Herein your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, the sure mercies of David. And so, when I think about what God has done for us, every good and perfect gift comes down from Him, and He can truly satisfy us if we will listen to Him. The devil, he just wants to keep you in that far country, just like he did the prodigal son. And that's why in Luke 15, you'll remember this young man goes out, spends everything that he has, wastes everything. He's in the pig pen, and he realizes, he comes to himself and he says, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. And he goes back, and I'm thankful that his father must have been watching out for him, because his father runs to him. And he hugs him, and he's glad that he's back. And so there they were, back in the Father's house, where there is great joy and satisfaction to be found. And so, just ask yourself, am I in the far country, living in this world where there's no true satisfaction? Or will you live in God's house, in the church, where there is true satisfaction? Let us be like this prodigal son and come to that realization. And before it's too late, before we die. Because otherwise, we're not going to have that second chance. And then also think about the Father who loves us, who cares for us so deeply, and wants us to come to Him. So if you're subject to the invitation tonight, will you come to Him? Margaret, we stand and sing the invitation song.